What we're going to talk about next is shifts in supply and demand. And so we started out with two graphs and we didn't really move them. But what we're going to introduce now is this idea that conditions can change what the supply curve or the demand curve looks like. So now you've already talked about shifts in demand just as the demand curve. Right? So you've talked about the things like price of a substitute, price of a complement, income, number of buyers, and things like that. Now, what we're going to talk about is adding this to equilibrium. What do shifts in demand do to the equilibrium price? All right, so how do we draw the shifts in demand? Well, first of all, we've already talked about it as being either to the right or to the left, where this is what's called an increase in demand. All right, and this is different. Remember the term I wrote before, it's called increase in quantity demanded, or there's a difference between the quantity demanded, which is the move up and down the curve, and demand, which is the shift in the curve itself. Now, generally, like when I do it, and other professors do it differently. I will do it as a dash, because if you're using one color, you can tell the two apart. And then generally, they'll put a little hash mark saying that that's the new demand curve. And I like to have a little arrow just to make sure I'm going the right way. Now, if I go this way, and if I draw two, I've got the second hash. This is obviously a decrease in demand. All right, we've talked about things that can cause it to go up. Now, what would happen to the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity if you looked at supply and demand together? So, what we started with today was this. Quantity demanded, there's an equilibrium quantity and there's an equilibrium price. So what happens if you have an increase in demand? What is going to happen to the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity? So let's think of I'm trying to think of a good example though. You've got supply and demand for oranges. And all of a sudden something happens where everybody wants oranges. I'm going to say that there's a trend, was featured in a video. Everybody wants to drink orange juice because it's become quite popular. So for some reason, whether it's higher income, apples are bad, or the price of apples have gone up, or for taste and preferences, people just happen to like oranges, people are going to increase their demand for oranges. Now remember, increases in demand are drawn as a rightward shift in the demand curve. But once we have supply and demand together, we notice that this crossing point, this equilibrium point, has shifted up to here. The end result is that the equilibrium quantity goes up, right? If people demand more oranges, they're going to eat more oranges, drink more orange juice. But the other thing is that the price goes up. Anytime there's more competition for something, people are going to fight harder for it. And how do we fight for something in economics? We pay more for it. The price goes up. Now, this might not happen right away, right? You might, the first day this happened, you go to the store, you go to the fruit market, you're like, where did all the oranges go? They're cleared out, right? And if they don't change the price, you're going to find out that all the other people who really like oranges all of a sudden have bought them all. There's going to be a temporary shortage. But once the store figures this out and says, look, if people want them, we'll charge more, that this is going to work its way up and the price will rise. And so if there is an increase in demand, eventually you're going to find that the price will rise and that there will be a new equilibrium quantity that is the same for both supply and for demand. All right? Now you can go the opposite too, right? Something comes out, oranges are like a health hazard, right? Or whatever you want to say. You can say the price of apples has gone down, the price of grapefruit has gone down, or whatever condition. You can tell your own story. But if demand drops, demand decreases, then it's the same, only the opposite direction. You're going to find that you go shopping and there's all sorts of oranges there, nobody's bought them, nobody wants them anymore. There's going to be this surplus, and eventually they're going to mark down the price. And so if there's less demand for a product, demand decreases for a product, you're going to find that the new equilibrium point is going to have less bought and sold at a lower price. Price drops to this point down here. All right, so that's kind of, and again, when you're studying this, always ask yourself, does this make common sense? Right? If people want it less, they're going to buy it less. That makes sense. And they're going to pay less. That makes sense. And people see a lot of that stuff in real life.